every single time that the party frames start dropping, I'm like looking to WOG. And
Yep.
it's just like, so the healer brain is so hard to turn off. But
It
you're
really
absolutely
is.
right that like it's also a big positive.
I feel like there's a similarity between the process of like looking at the sheet music, interpreting that in your brain, and then being like, I'm going to take these actions with my hands. I feel like that's really similar to like looking at party frames and weak auras and then processing what to do. And then like, I'm going to do this with my hands.
I think the biggest thing that violin helped me with in terms of my gameplay was not having to deal with stress and anxiety when it comes to competing, because I had so much stage presence practice and like practice, you know, performing in front of people. You know,
thank you for joining in. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
All right, so I got some caller questions and I got some regular questions. Do you have any preference what you want to start with, or just let it rip? I don't really know how to.
Doesn't matter to me. So,
okay.
Oh, you're good.
Cool. All right. Well, one of them on my list is Mass Dispel and Poison Cleanse Totem CD nerf. What are your thoughts?
I think the Poison Cleanse CD nerf was necessary because of the affixes interaction. However, I would have preferred that they left Poison Cleanse kind of untouched and instead focused on making it so that not having that was less punishing. I think in general, a lot of these dungeon designs have too many punishing unique dispel mechanics, like the decurses in Stone Vault, the decurses in Grim Batol, the poison, the AoE poison on both the War Shell in City of Threads and the poison on last boss in Arakara. I think there's just too much that rewards unique dispel mechanics, and we used to have this type of issue before, back in Shadowlands, and they kept getting nerfed because people were not enjoying that, and the fact that like certain dungeons required a decurse or certain dungeons required a poison cleanse,
right?
And without it, things were just so immensely like more difficult. And so they kind of moved away from that design, which I really liked. And we didn't really have as big of that issue in recent seasons. But then this season, it's back again. And really not a big fan of that in general. So I see why they nerfed Poison Cleanse CD, both because obviously it was really powerful for last boss in Arakara, but also because it like completely negated the affix with the timing. But I would have preferred that instead they targeted these pain point spots that were difficult without Poison Cleanse and made them easier for, you know, players who didn't have that mechanic, rather than nerfing the Poison Cleanse ability itself.
Right. It's like nerf the solution to the mechanic and not just like why we needed it in the first place. Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Gotcha. Yeah, Master Spell was like, now that Master Spell is 2 minutes, sometimes I'll think to myself, be like, remember when that was 40 seconds or 45 seconds or something? It's fucking nuts. Wait, is that a peach Celsius?
It is kiwi guava.
Oh shit, I have a peach one. Peach is my favorite.
Peach is really
sponsored
good.
by Celsius. No, I'm kidding. I'm gonna edit out a couple spots here while I look at my list. My bad. Oh, okay. So the last few times I tuned into your stream, I didn't really introduce you, but obviously everyone knows HPAL streamer Ellesmere. But the last few times I tuned in, you're playing Prot. So I wanted to ask, are you having fun? Are you like pissed that Holy Pal is not good or something? Or what happened there? Because I didn't ask because you were in the middle of a key, but
I am having
what's
fun.
going on? Are you having fun?
Yeah, I am having fun. I like Prot. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm moving away from HPAL. But the reality is I only have a few keys left that I can even do on HPAL because I think that Disc is too powerful when it comes to like PI and just how much damage Disc can do, not even factoring in PI, especially single target Pryodam. It's just a really, really, really good spec that synergizes incredibly well with Prot Pally. So in the current meta where Prot Pally is meta, obviously, you know, HPAL can still do a lot, and HPAL is very good. But it's probably about on average 1 key level worse than Disc Priest. And
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty much where I'm at right now with most of my key levels, outside of like a few that I could probably do on I could probably do, I think the key levels left that I'm targeting are like Arakara and Miss 18, and then
Oh,
Grim
damn.
Baton Stone Vault 16, and then Siege 17 and Necrotic Wake 17. Once I get those, I don't think HPAL can really do anything higher than that. I think you just have to be a
Damn.
Disc Priest for the very last of the key levels. But, you know, I don't think that's necessarily an issue. I don't mind there being a meta, and I don't like, as long as the healers are viable. Like, that's why you don't hear me like screeching for HPAL buffs right now, is because I feel like HPAL healing is good enough that I can play mostly up to the same key levels as Disc and as like the meta comp. And that's all I want. You know, the only issue I ever have is when one spec is like way too dominant or way too bad. As long as things are reasonably tuned, I really don't have an issue. But
That's cool.
the problem has been, you look at some seasons, and that is the case, where it's just like, you look at Dragonflight season 3 and 4, where HPAL literally could not even heal, like within 3 key levels of what other healers were doing.
Especially
And
going
it's
from
insanity.
season 2 as well.
Exactly,
Like,
yeah.
on this all-time high, and then
Yep.
you're like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
so,
do you think that's helped out at all by the fact that the key levels were squished down a little bit? Like, it makes that difference from like a 17 siege to a 16 siege like larger, where maybe in the past, if it was more gradual, you might be like, oh, maybe I could do that 16 and a half or like whatever the equivalent would be.
yeah.
And where it's now, it's kind of like, oh, this is the cap. Like, I feel it, and I'm fucking sure that this is the highest siege I could do, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's good and bad. I think the good thing is that now the discrepancy between key levels and like the highest IO between healers isn't going to feel as bad. Like, I might feel worse about the meta currently if the difference between a 17 and an 18 wasn't so severe, and instead it was like the difference between a 27 and a 29. Like, if I was, because before it would basically be 2 key levels behind that I was, that HPAL was, and that HPAL capped out at, and that would feel worse. So I do think that the key switch definitely helped in terms of making it feel like when there is discrepancies in the meta, it's not as severe, or, you can still do almost as good. When you're multiple key levels behind, though, that feels really bad. So I think that you're right. That definitely did help.
Cool. Okay. Another thing that I was gonna say is I really like when, I'm sure you could play Prop Paladin perfectly well, but I love when my healer friends like switch to tank or vice versa or whatever, and you get to see them like learn, like, oh shit, this is a tank frontal. Like, I didn't realize I have to point this over here. Or just little things like, I don't know, because me and my friends, we play more at the like right now I'm just doing like, I haven't done any 13s. I've done, I think, all the 12s on my dragon, and then like some 12s on my priest, and some of my, like, I usually have 5 tunes from like the 10 to 12 range, whatever that equivalent would be. So whenever we swap, we get like, you can kind of just sneak like a 600 item level prop paladin like into a 10 or an 11 and kind of get away with it, but you do kind of have to know what you're doing. So we've been having some fun doing that.
Yeah,
but it's always cool to watch like healers go to a different role, and then a lot of the time they're like way better than you think too, especially, and this kind of leads to my next question, but if you have like a healer brain and a healer UI, playing a spec like Prop Paladin, where you're like, you still have the brain to be like, oh, I sacked this guy on this pull. Like, oh, I can hands that. I know there's a dispel coming. So like, you kind of have your class utility like covered. Not you, but like just, someone who's rerolling.
Absolutely.
But there are times when I see, like, I'll be healing a +10 on my priest, and I'll notice someone gets bolted or stands in something and they're at 20. And then my Prop Paladin pug starts wogging them. And I'm like, no. And I'll paints up the tank because I know that he's dropping his Shield of the Righteous and his Consecration in the next like 2 seconds because he's looking at his frames. Like, I've seen this happen so many times where I'm like, oh shit, the tank's gonna get destroyed. And then they'll bubble at like 10 and it just spirals. But like, there's this finesse of like, you can be helpful, but also you're the one who has the best global to like save the tank because you're the tank. So it's kind of like a dance. Have you had any like moments where you're trying to like wog a little too much, or you sack someone and then you're like, oh shit, I can't sack you, I'm gonna die? anything like
Absolutely.
that?
Early on, it's like sack hasn't really been too much of an issue, but early on, like the whole blogging people, I'm
Uh
still,
huh.
I've only been playing prot for like a week now, and
Oh damn.
I still every single time that the party frames start dropping, I'm like looking to wog.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
it's just like, so the healer brain is so hard to turn off. But
It
you're
really
absolutely
is.
right that like it's also a big positive, especially being an HPAL. Like all of the unique pally utility I is so subconscious to use
Yeah.
all the time, and I have, great uh a great ability to like focus on what I'm doing while also looking at party frames because I've been healing
Mm-hmm.
for so long, and
Yep.
that's what healers do. So there's a lot of really big upsides to being a healer and then swapping roles. And you also like, I also know everything that's going to kill a tank, because
Right.
from pushing these keys as an HPAL, I know literally every spot where my tank is in trouble,
Mm-hmm.
and where, the danger tank busters are, and where I've seen tanks die the most. And, all of that knowledge transfers really well. So now
Yep.
when I'm tanking, it's like I basically don't have to worry about any of the other stuff that I normally worry about, and I can only focus on that one
Right.
thing. It's like there's just so much less input going in, and so much more just like focus. So I find it uh to be significantly more like, I don't know. There's so many less things that I
It
have to
feels
worry
like your
about.
attention is drawn in fewer directions all the time as a tank,
Exactly.
kind of, but like the direction it's drawn in is very, very, very important, which can
Exactly.
kind of be hard for me sometimes. But yeah, I have
Yeah.
that same thing because I've played AUG for so long and I've always healed and I tank sometimes and I play a bunch of different things. But like, I can never play a pure DPS spec because I don't want to change my UI to have like a different one when I'm DPSing or tanking. Like, my UI is just how it is.
Yeah.
But I'll be like combusting. I'm like, oh, I'll get that decurse, don't worry. And then like someone gets targeted, I'm like, he is turtle, press turtle. I'm like trying to call people's defensives like while in my DPS cooldowns, and they're just like, just stop, just play a different fucking spec, dude. Like this is not for you.
Yeah.
So I definitely know what you mean by like you like can't turn off like the group like awareness of just staring. Like it hurts me definitely a lot sometimes because it's like, why am I looking if he is turtle? It's none of my fucking business.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's tricky. I tuned in once. So there's this thing. I don't know where it comes from. It's the tempered thing that you shared health with.
Tempered in
I tuned
battle.
in and Billy was like, "Why did I get hit by my tank for like 1,000,000 damage? Why is this in my deathlock?" I was like, "Oh no, I gotta ask him about that." So,
Yeah.
what exactly is that? You like spirit link them, kind of?
So it's I think it's the worst ability they've ever added to the game, because it's simultaneously the most broken and OP thing ever introduced, and also the most troll and awful talent.
Right.
It is somehow incredibly busted in both opposite directions. So basically what it does is it's a spirit link that auto activates whenever somebody with your armament drops below 40% with your sacred weapon. And you
Oh,
pretty much always have a sacred weapon out at all times.
right.
So anytime that you drop below 40% health, or they drop below 40%, either person, it will
Hmm.
start equalizing you guys' health pools. Um, Now, a lot of the times that is incredibly OP, and it
Yeah,
leads to, basically 100% uptime on a spirit link that has no ICD at all. And
that's crazy.
yeah, and can trigger on multiple people. So like, I could have 3 different armaments out, and I
Oh
drop below
shit.
40, and then all of us just start sharing health. And it's very, very, very broken.
Oh my god.
Um, that being said, it's also, it also obviously has the potential to be very troll,
Mm-hmm.
because you spirit link at the wrong time, somebody drops their health, 2 million from the tank dropping low, and then they have to share their health, and then they get hit by any ability,
Like
and
any
boom, they're
tick of an
dead.
AoE. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
like I would say 95% of the time it is insanely broken and incredibly overpowered,
Mm-hmm.
and needs to be removed from the game. And then 5% of the time it's like, wow, this talent is awful. And the problem is that people don't notice when it's insanely broken
Right.
and when it's saving their lives. They only notice when it kills them. So, Tempered in Battle could save your group's life 20 times in a key, but kill one person in the key. And that's all.
And you'll never
hear
the end of it. Yeah,
exactly.
That happened in a stone vault. Now that I'm remembering, I'm like, I think it was that buff. And we were looking on the last boss, someone was like, I got ticked for like 900k for this. And then I was like, hold up. And I pulled up the overall for the key. I was like, yeah, but he healed you like 50 mil over the key. So he might have saved you. You know what I mean? It's not like all bad, but yeah, it's crazy because you put out your weapons like not related to that, right? Like you give them for damage and other things. So then this passive that a lot of people don't know about, I don't know, it's kind of troll.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, that being said, I do actually start, like, you play around it now. Tempered in Battle is so OP. You don't, like, Sacred Weapon also doesn't scale based on how much damage people are doing. So it doesn't matter who you put it on. It's going to do the same damage regardless.
Oh, okay.
So you really do want to play around Tempered in Battle, both as Pro and Holy. Constantly as HPAL, I will be throwing my Sacred Weapon on the tank so that I can intentionally Spirit Link with the tank to basically make them immortal.
Oh. Right.
You can also do cheesy things like you can bubble when the shared health starts happening, and then if you bubble and heal yourself to full, it will make them literally like they cannot die. They're just immortal.
That's crazy.
There's also super cheese stuff like you can throw, if a mob is MC'd, you can throw your armament on that mob, and you will share health with them, but they have like 20 times our health pool. So you literally just become immortal when that happens. So I have a clip of me doing a Necrotic Wake 16 on the last boss. And I temper we had a Vanguard that our DK had MC'd throughout the dungeon. And I shared my tempered health
too.
Yeah.
Like more than normal.
So I threw a weapon on them when we were dying. And we got up to a 9 stack of the shields, which on a plus 16 is literally hitting me from 100% to 5% health.
The boss shield?
Yeah. So the boss shield,
like the AoE
ramps
thing.
Up. Yeah, the AoE thing,
my God,
it ramps
that's
up.
A lot. Yeah.
Well, we were wiping, so it was like screwed anyways, so we couldn't kill the shield. So, but I threw my armament accidentally on the Vanguard, and that's how I figured out this worked, because my health pool started going from 100% to 5% and then back up to 100% every like millisecond. And so you saw my health bar just teleporting from 5% to 100% constantly. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? And then I realized I was sharing health with the Vanguard. And so I was literally immortal. Yeah, it was crazy.
Holy shit. That spell's broken. I didn't even think about it as a healer too. Yeah, because you just throw it on pull, and like if they drop to 40, then guess what? Now they have your health too.
I constantly am throwing it on my my tanks, like on pull, because that's the sketchiest time for tanks normally, and I'll just share health with them until they stabilize, and just pop my defensive and watch my own health. And especially when you can like use the interaction with bubble and make it so that you're both immuning the AoE damage events that might be happening during trash, and you're sharing health with them, and it's just like you're just mitigating tens of millions of damage.
I love spells like that where you can like plan stuff out and do stuff like reminds me of like
it is really unique.
Yeah, kind of like Intervene in I don't know if you've been playing with Proud Warrior this season at all, but in Siege, that ricochet, I love how you can intervene that, because you like intervene the target, so you take their debuff, and then because you intervened them, you're so close that you're the next target, so you take theirs and a second one, but I don't think it stacks. Like I think it just refreshes. So then it's like the tank takes 2, and then there's only 2 debuffs to go out, and you can do it every other one, or if it's a low key like I usually do, like you just have it up because there's the phase in between. So like, shit like that is really fun and rewarding, I feel.
I 100% agree. I think that playing around Tempered in Battle is a lot of fun, but it's also just one of those abilities that I think is too game breaking and needs to be given an ICD. The biggest issue is just that it has no ICDs. The fact that it can just trigger non-stop
so crazy.
over and over and over again and never go on cooldown is way too busted. They need to look into that for sure.
Yeah, that's wild.
Even just giving it like a 10-second ICD would make a big difference. So you can't just Spirit Link your entire group, or just constantly have it rolling
any
non-stop.
Kind of like lockout. Yeah, it seems like it needs something. Like they forgot like an ingredient there when they
Yeah,
when they sent that through.
I was completely shocked when it went live. I saw that and I was like, okay, obviously it's gonna have an ICD. It's not gonna be anywhere near what it actually says on the tooltip. But nope, it's just a 24/7 active Spirit Link that can be triggered anytime anyone drops below 40%. So
I know there's things on PTR like that sometimes. Like I play a lot of beta in PTR, and like sometimes I'll see stuff and I'm just like, I'm not even going to interact with this because there's just no shot that goes through. Like, and then it goes live and you're in the dungeon the entire season 1. You're just like, fuck. We all didn't put feedback because we thought this was too obvious.
That's what I thought about our class tree. Paladin's class tree. I spent like a month and a half on PTR being like, these are obviously temporary talents. Like they're going to be replaced. And then they just never got replaced. And now it went live with about 20 placeholder talents that do nothing. God. And I have no idea what's going on at this point, but oh well.
Speaking of, one of my questions is about PTR. I spend like a lot of time on PTR, like AFK making random UI stuff and like copy pasting spell IDs and stuff. I feel like you're kind of the same way probably. Do you have like a process for like making weak cores for the next season? Or you just kind of run them and like see what happens, or what does that process look like?
Typically what I'll do is I will go into, I have like a set of weak cores that I make for each type of ability. So I want to make sure if there's a bait weak aura, then or like something that I need to bait at an exact time every time. So for example, like Ruby Life Pools, the second boss,
okay,
the Kokia Bloodhoof or whatever.
Yeah.
The one that you need to bait the boulder at the exact time so that the boulder aims correctly. Anything
doesn't
like
hit
that
pebble, that little
exactly.
Curb,
or like Grim Batol, the second boss, Forge Master, where you need to bait his frontal. Anything like that, then I'll have a bait weak aura where, it makes one specific type of sound. That's always my bait sound, which for me is a bite horn. And then I have a little like circle around my character that shows me exactly when it's going to go off. And then, so anytime there's a new season, I take those templates and then I just find all the new spell IDs of the things I want to bait and I add it to the weak aura. And then same thing, like my frontals weak aura, obviously the shotgun sound one. Any frontals that happen in any dungeon, I go in, I make sure I know exactly which frontals they are, and then I just add them to the weak aura. Nice. And so I do that same system for every season and just make sure that I have all of the like basic weak auras the way that I like it. And I always tell people, it doesn't matter what your system is, but everyone needs some type of system. If you're trying to push high keys, you need to have consistency in terms of, every type of X mechanic has this sound or this, visual. And so for me, it's like, baits are Bicorn and AoE damage event is Raid Warning, and dropping pools or like dropping a mechanic away from your group is Air Horn. And, so each different type of, and then frontals are gunshots. And so each type of mechanic has a specific sound that correlates. So for me as a healer, I operate mostly with audio cues because my visual is frequently taken up by, looking at party frames and stuff. So I rely a lot on audio cues, which is why you hear so many audio cues when you watch me play. Other people, like to, DPS players especially love to rely on visual cues more than audio cues. It doesn't matter what your choice is, as long as you have consistency in terms of mechanics. You don't want the same exact type of weak aura for every different type of mechanic.
Yeah.
Or it won't be easy because you need to be able to process like 10 things at once, especially as a healer. And if you have, 4 different weak auras all showing the exact same style and all making the same sound, you have to like actively spend brain power to decipher what is telling you what to do. Whereas for me, it's like I hear one sound, I know, okay, I need to drop this. I need to dodge the frontal. I need to, whatever it might be.
You're like looking at your other monitor and you're like, oh, there's a dispel because I heard that sound. I know it's like, it's just like in your bones. Like,
Yeah. Like sound. I have an important weak aura or an important dispels weak aura that will highlight the frame and make a phone ringing sound anytime.
I had a feeling it was the phone.
Yeah.
I remember.
It's very obnoxious, but it works a charm. I literally never miss a dispel. It's always instant.
Yeah, there's something I almost want to call it like UI literacy or something. Like there's like it is a skill of like people will talk about like showing up to keys with like consumables and stuff, or like people inspect your enchants, and I'm like, why are you talking? Like I don't know. I feel like it's much more important to like, is your UI set up in a way where like the information on there actually makes sense to you, and it's not just like clutter. Like I've been working on this. It's like a small pack. I usually use the Terrathol pack for the last couple seasons, but I made my own like little extra one, and I've been trying to like, I have my friends test it, and they'll tell me like, oh, this thing says dispel, like it'll say to purge. Say there's something that gets 3 stacks, you want to purge at like 2 or 3. It was telling them to purge at 1, and I'm like, okay, all I'm doing is training them to ignore this weak aura, because they say, oh, this one doesn't matter at 1 stack, so they're just never going to purge it. They're never going to look at the stacks again. So I'm like trying to tweak everything so like it'll only have a sound like when there's an action that you're supposed to take. So it's been kind of fun to like watch people and then watch them ignore it and be like, oh, why are they ignoring this now? It's because I've taught them to ignore it, because that sound means nothing. And it's like fun psychological stuff.
Absolutely. And I think part of it is like, you touched on it for a second, but it's like making sure that you're, you know, the order of importance of things that are actually going to impact your performance. And, you know, I get people all the time, constantly. One of like the most common questions I get is all about secondary stats and optimizing your secondary stats as HPAL. And I try to tell people, like, I will tell you this information, but I'm going to be honest, secondary stats and optimizing your gear and shit like that, for at least for healers. For DPS, it matters a bit more, but you also just have sims to tell you exactly what to do, so it doesn't matter too much. But for healers, like, I see people constantly obsessing and spending hours tweaking when it's going to make 0.1% throughput difference. And the reality is that in order of importance, I see people doing that who have some of the worst UIs I've ever seen, and who spend no time on trying to optimize their UI, who spend no time trying to, you know, study dungeon mechanics or learn damage patterns or, you know, work on their mouse overs or whatever it might be. There are so many more important things that you could be doing. And so it's just kind of a thing where it's like, people need to understand where the importance lies in terms of how they should allocate their time to improve their performance. So you've got, you know, I'd say the number one thing for healers, UI. UI is wildly underrated in terms of its performance impact. It has by far the biggest performance impact. Things like being able to see targeted spells before they come out. Things like being able to see, you know, everybody's defensives that are both active and available. You know, being able to see kick trackers and stop trackers and, you know,
like
so many different things, nameplates and sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, renewing Blaze, like the amount of times I've been handsed at 20% when I have renewing Blaze, nothing's happening. I'm gonna top myself. Like, I could outrange the healer. I'll be at 100% in a few seconds, buddy. Like, chill. And I'll just get like, hands from the tank. I'm like, God damn.
I had like covered, a mage that has alter time active, and a healer is sweating to keep them active. Stuff like that all the time, you know. Secondary stats are nice, but in terms of importance and impact on your performance, extraordinarily low down for healers. And you're way better off spending the time that you would be spending optimizing those stats doing pretty much anything else. It's
like would you rather have 2% more crit or a freedom target of target macro? It's like one of those is going to be like really good for you for the rest of the time you play HPAL, and one of them like probably doesn't matter. And a lot of the time, I try to say this to my friends a lot, because people start dooming, like, I don't know, people, they see the meta or they see choices that like high key players make, and then they're like, oh, well, I just can't play Skull Bash anymore as Resto Druid. Like, it's just not doable. I'm like, what? Like, people will DM me in keys and tell me that I'm wrong for playing Skull Bash in a Grimbatol on a +10. And I'm like, top kicks, like I'm kicking every tremor and shit. They're like, no, like you need to take this defensive note. Like, for what, man? I have bear form. So like there's kind of this thing where like you kind of have to look at all the choices and be like, I don't know, like fixating on your stats and being like, I need a little more crit versus like making meaningful choices. Like, you don't really need every ounce of throughput in most pug keys. Like, I think you've said this before, like on Quasi, you were like, it really doesn't matter until you get like to the higher end. Like, my main thing is I don't know, like I feel confident healing like weekly keys and pugs because like on my shaman, I know I can just solo that kick. Like, I'm not healing. I can just stop it, and then I can thunderstorm, and then I can cap, and then I run hex, even though that's kind of cringe. But like I use that as a stop for like the resonant barrage, and
Yeah.
maybe I don't use hex on that. I use sleepwalk on that, but just like I just take every little drop of utility, and then people inspect me and they're like, "Oh, you don't have 4% crit on your shaman." I'm like, I don't know. I got tremor, man. I don't know. I'm very opinionated on like taking everything that can help and then like figuring out how to live with 6% less DR. Like you don't really need it.
I mean, a lot of that is just coming down to what you value. Do you value your own personal throughput, or do you value chesting the key? And the problem is that a lot of people don't realize that throughput is basically completely irrelevant up until like at minimum plus 13, plus 14, you know. If you do a dungeon clean and get all your kicks and all your stops and everyone lives and nobody dies to stupid stuff, you can chest most key levels, pretty much any key level, with even undergeared players. Obviously, you need to have a basic understanding of your rotation as DPS players, but assuming that your DPS players do, then it's all just about executing the mechanics correctly and getting your CCs and stops and kicks and everything, and you will chest the key. But too many people get caught up with throughput and focusing on damage, and when that really doesn't play a factor in the vast majority of key levels.
Yeah, I almost wish we could like I was at this joke that we could do like a test where you give a DPS player 2 possible futures, and one future is the damage meter looks like this. You're 20% less than everyone else, but we time the key. And the other future is you're 20% ahead of everyone else, but we deplete the key. And then like lie detector, like which future do you want? And they're just sitting there sweating like, shit, I really want the one on the right. But like, it's so true. And then every now and then you find those players that like don't give a shit. Like they'll run out of the pole and like, you know, kick that one mob that's far, and then you just start b-netting those people, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's so funny. Like you could tell like where the priorities are a lot of the time for different players, and it's I don't know, it's like different games. Like some people are playing the like overall DPS game, and some people are playing like time the key. Some people are playing both. But.
Yep.
So talking about UI stuff more, what like, so you're saying you lean more towards sounds. Like what, is there anything that you have like a process for categorizing them? Like, oh, this is this mechanic, it's like that, I'm gonna use an icon instead of a sound or something, like a freedom bouncing in the middle? Or is there any like decision making process you have around that?
For that, it's all just about personal preference. Everybody has different things that works for them. For me, the way my brain works, most visual cues don't help except for like, you know, action bar style things, which just show me basic cooldowns. In terms of like warnings of things that are happening, I pretty much exclusively use audio cues, and that includes text to speech. I love text to speech for certain mechanics. Now, some people overuse text to speech and have it just announcing every mechanic and stuff. And I think that that's not great either. You want to be sparse with your selection of what you actually want to text to speech. So for me, I only do it for like very essential things. And then I rely on generic sounds for the majority of like dungeon mechanics. So like I was saying, you know, frontals have a specific generic sound, and dropping, like when I need to drop sound. Something outside. Yeah.
You know the gunshots.
And so every type of unique mechanic has its own unique sound. And and then I use text to speech for like the more unique, like not just generic, but like very specific thing that I have to do, or, you know, whatever it might be. If I need to press a very specific button at a very specific time, then I will use text to speech to tell me, okay, press this now. And so I think there's a good compromise to be made in terms of text to speech calling out things for you, and generic sounds for generic events in M+.
That makes sense. I was thinking, so I use a lot of the text to speech stuff too, and there's something I noticed is that like when it gets multiple like things, it'll make a queue, And so there's things that I'm
Yeah.
trying to, it'll like, I have a text to speech dispel, but sometimes I also have text to speech like Zephyr and like,
Yeah, it can't
you know,
overlap.
bark or stuff like that. So if you get 3 of those things, like the dispel gets buried behind the Zephyr and the other stuff. And so I was thinking about doing, I don't know if you know anything about like importing sounds. I know you can make sound packs. I was thinking
Yeah.
about making my own, like, so that way they're not text to speech, but they're actually just sound clips that can all play like overlapping. I mean, I guess that would sound kind of
You
crazy
can definitely
all at the
do
same time,
that,
but
but
it's just a
yeah,
lot of
I
work.
think the other issue is that when you have them overlapping and everyone's talking at the same time,
Yeah, right.
That's kind of why I like generic sounds for most mechanics, is so that I
Gotcha,
can
true.
hear the different sounds. Because if I just heard 3 different clips of people talking at the same time, I'd be like, what? Like, what
Right.
did they just say?
That makes sense. So, like,
I don't know what to press.
Yeah, your dispel will never get queued behind other shit because it's the phone. That makes sense.
Exactly.
So I should like kind
So
of have a better priority system with that and make
so like when
dispel a
let's say,
sound.
you know, a frontal and a dispel is happening at the same time, and I'm supposed to press Blessing of Winter.
You'll get all of those. Yeah.
I will have all 3 of those go off at the same time, but only one of them will be text to speech.
Right.
I will hear those very unique sounds. So I'll hear the phone ringing and a gunshot. So I know I need to dodge and dispel. But then I'll also hear my text to speech say Blessing of Winter. So I know I need to press that at that exact moment. So that's why I only use text to speech for like very specific things. And usually it's never for mechanics. It's almost exclusively for my abilities and like what I should press. So, you know, for tanking, sometimes I'll have something that says like Ardent Defender or Bubble. And then for Holy, I have something that tells me to Blessing of Winter, or Summer, or Spring, or whatever. So I make sure I always hit them on cooldown. But I rarely ever use text to speech for actual damage events or like actual, you know, mechanics, just because of that reason. Because if I ever have text to speech overlapping, then I need to know if a frontal's happening, I need to know the millisecond
right now. Yeah. Not like after it happened.
Exactly.
Because a second makes a difference when it gets like queued like that. Yeah, I'm gonna rethink that. Or I kind of like little projects. I might try to do a sound pack, but you're right. If they're all overlapping, it could be weird.
I mean,
it might be that I don't need
sound packs aren't bad, and you could. It's just that you need to not overuse it, right? So you need to not have instances where 3 of them can be firing off all at the same time. You need to combine stuff like that with generic sounds as well, so that way, you know, because solely relying on text to speech is too much input.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I do use a lot of the normal sounds for like. I think I maybe do the opposite as you, which is probably not good. But I use like the sounds, like if there's a resource I'm overcapping, like say I have 2 prescience or something, I use Robot Blip for that a lot, or like my Frozen Orb reset on my mage, or like 3 trees on my druid.
I mean, that's
stuff
fine.
Like that.
Like, I have like a boxing gong sound that happens when my armaments are both off of cooldown. So I remember to press it on CD.
Gotcha. Oh, I want to make sure I don't forget to ask you this one because Leanne liked this question. But so I wanted to ask you about like playing violin and healing M+, and I don't know how to really explain it, but like I feel like there's a similarity between the process of like if you're playing violin, I don't know if you read sheet music or not, or if you like just have it in your head or whatever. Okay, so looking at the sheet music, interpreting that in your brain, and then being like, I'm gonna take these actions with my hands is a lot. I feel like that's really similar to like looking at party frames and weak auras and then processing what to do, and then like I'm gonna do this with my hands. Like I feel like that kind of like a flow state deal. Like you want to minimize the lag of like the decision making, and I feel like that's kind of similar. And I wondered your thoughts around that. If it like feels the same, like when you're really locked in healing a key and you're like nailing everything. Like there's this feeling of like, holy shit! Like I almost like I'm like not here. Like it's just kind of like. I don't know how to explain it.
I 100% agree. No,
you're just like in it. You're not
there's
thinking
for
like
sure
there's no
a
thought.
certain level of like flow state, like you're talking about, where you just like get in a zone and then it's like super subconscious, and that happens to me a lot, and it is very helpful. I think the biggest thing that violin helped me with in terms of my gameplay was basically being not having to deal with stress and anxiety when it comes to competing, because I had so much stage presence practice and like practice, you know, performing in front of people, that, you know, growing up being a violinist and everything, I you know, I would have to do concerts all the time, and so I got a lot of that practice, and so I don't really have stage fright. You know, I don't really have any of the anxiety and fears that comes with like playing with other people or playing in front of people or whatever it might be, which has helped my streaming and, you know, me playing in tournaments and stuff. I don't get anxiety when I do that. I mean, obviously there's a certain level of anxiety, but it's more like adrenaline for me.
Yeah.
And I also learned when I was younger how to convert that anxiety and adrenaline into focus. So it actually makes me play better. Whereas like some people who don't have that experience it can be really overwhelming for them, and they get, you know, a lot of anxiety, and then they perform poorly because they're not used to that type of environment, you know, competing at that level in front of so many people. And so it can be really stressful, and then it can affect their gameplay. But for me, it actually helps my gameplay because I think I had so much experience with that growing up playing violin. So
yeah, that makes sense. Like you already have like the mental framework of like, I know how to handle pressure, like, and performing on violin, like IRL in front of people, like when they can see, like that's, I mean, streaming is hard too, but like that's a very stressful moment, especially when you're younger, and like to lock in like the process of like, okay, incoming pressure, I convert it to performance. Like that's really, really cool. That's a good experience to have for sure. Do you did you have any like early streaming moments where you were like, I don't know, you got raided by someone and you were like, oh my god, I'm scared? Or do you remember any like moments like that early on?
Yeah, I got raided early on in Shrine of the Storms by Fandy.
Shrine of the Storms. Oh shit.
Yeah, I was in Shrine of the Storms, and it was like the first big streamer that had ever raided me, and I did get super stressed out for like a second, and then the second one was J.B raided me. And so the two of them were like my first big experiences with being raided by a lot of people. And I definitely felt some stress at first, but like you said, I kind of just got back. Instead of focusing on that, I just focused on my gameplay and tuned it out. And so I kind of used that experience that I had with converting that stress and anxiety and pressure into performance, and use that to my advantage so that I didn't, you know, end up performing poorly as soon as I got rated. So that was definitely helpful there. But there was for sure like, and for me, it's not like I don't get nerves or think about it at all, or like, you know, I'm just like super iron mental. Afterwards is when it hits. So like as soon as I turned off stream, then it was like, oh my god, you know, like, and then it was like, that was, you don't have the like
activity to channel the nervousness into, so you're kind of, it's like the train stops moving and you're just like there now.
Exactly. So for me, it all hit as soon as I stopped channeling it into my performance, and as soon as I turned off stream, then it was like, holy fuck, you know.
What
and
just
it was
happened?
Yeah, and it was really cool. But yeah, that was definitely like my first big experience with being rated, and it was really fun. And but yeah, for me, it's just like, while I'm actually actively doing things, I'm fine. And then as soon as I stop, that's when everything hits.
That's cool. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, and then also I have on here to thank you for some weak auras. So in the last episode, I don't know if I edited it out for the YouTube version or not. I hope I did. I went back and forth. But I, like, have you ever had this thing where someone tells you information and then a week later you think you made it? You're like, oh yeah, absolutely. I learned last week that you could freedom this. And my friend's like, I fucking told you. Like, why are you telling me I told you? And I'm like, oh, my bad. So yeah, I like thought that I invented anchoring text to nameplates, but I literally stole it from you. So just want to
like
clarify
the focus thing?
Yeah. I was like so hyped because I made it so if there's a purge and you could purge it, it'll show purge on the nameplate. And I'm like really proud of this. Same thing with Soothe. And Marvel was like, yeah, it's so good. And I just, for some reason, forgot. And then I was like, in preparation for talking to you, I'm like, let me look at his few, recent YouTube videos and stuff. And like the first poll is just focus, focus, focus. I'm like, fuck, I stole this from Ellesmere, 100%. So I put a little disclaimer. If it is on the YouTube video, it has a little tag at the bottom, like, hey, like I'm delusional. But yeah, so
good.
thank you for that idea.
I love that kind of stuff. I love people creating weak auras and like
I've been stealing your weak auras for years. Not even kidding. Like there was one, oh shit, what was it? Did you make the Quaking Stopcast one?
I made a version
where it's
of it,
green.
Yeah.
Okay. I stole your version and I repurposed it for the Shattering Bellow of Freehold.
Yeah.
And
to
then
be
like
fair, I did the same thing. So
okay, cool.
I don't know who the original author was, but
all good. I had given it to our friend.
A lot of weak auras are just, repurposed versions of older weak auras.
Yeah, there's like this like I don't want to call it like a culture, but there's like it's like I don't know. It's definitely like that. Like you just like steal triggers and stuff and you're like, wow, I never thought about that.
That's kind of how everything is though,
Yeah,
like music's the same way. All music is just stolen and
same
repurposed
chords,
music
same riffs
of older shit. Like
resampling.
Yeah. So I don't care when people do that kind of stuff.
I use
think it's
that
cool.
And I used your Incorporeal one for a long time, and I've always used your Breath of Eons one too, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
That was big. And that's the highest keys I've ever done was on AUG. Was that season it came out? And I was using that Incorporeal the whole time. 2, so
Dragonflight was when it came out.
Yeah. It was a fun time to be an AUG when no one could tell if you were good or not.
True.
And your scales gave like 16% max HP. Oh my god, what
insane.
A time to be alive. Give me the IO. Oh, I also wanted to ask you, or more so comment, the GG WoW content. I love that shit. The key binding episode where you guys talked about keybinds for like an hour. I don't know if you remember that one, but that was that was a banger with like the pug scene and like my friends and stuff. Like that video got sent around a lot. It probably got a bunch of views, but like that is one of the funniest topics is to like listen to you and Growl be like, you keybind consecration to shift 2 or like just some random shit. Like it's just so funny. Everyone can have that conversation too. Like just in Discord at any point, you're like, oh, my AMS is keybound to like shift space, and someone else just goes, the fuck did you just say?
Yeah.
So people are so opinionated on keybinds, and like I
know somebody who's got Crusader Strike bound to space bar. So
what?
I don't even I don't. That's the thing that I love about keybinds though, is that it's so personal and unique, and everybody has a different, like you get to see
it feels like an attack if someone has the wrong one.
Yeah. And
you
like
get
to, it's also fun when like your brain lines up with someone else's.
Yes.
You're both like, oh shit, I
have health pod on shift 4. Yeah. I always keybind meld to control F, and people don't like that one, but it's just it's always worked. Yeah.
My meld, all my racials. So the only thing that I tell people about keybinds is I don't give a fuck what your keybind layout is at all, but you need consistency between your characters.
Yes.
You can't be playing one character and have your defensive on one button and then you switch to another character and it's on a completely different button. Or that's like crazy. You have your racial on different buttons when you cross characters, or your cooldowns, or your rotational abilities. Like there should be a system that you have that works for you that is transferable to all other specs that play the game.
Yes. And that's like one of the most like setting up your tunes. Like, I don't know, like if you don't do that, I know it sucks to like rebind everything, but I would literally say like consider it. Like if you play a bunch of tunes, because like I play so many tunes, and not that I'm like the best at anything, but like people will be like, oh, like how did you, I don't know, like my friend will play Resto Shaman the whole season and the highest she'll do is like a 10. And then I'll like log on and just do 10s. I'm like, because you don't actually have to heal it, but my kick is on the same button. My focus is on the same button. Like my thunderstorm is my in-cap roar. Like I just know how to stop the stuff. I literally don't know the healing rotation. Like I just riptide people between pulls, and they're like, oh, like it's more about like this is happening and this is the keybind that counters it.
Yeah.
And I'll even go as far as like my wing buffet on the dragon. I changed it to the typhoon icon. My Stormbolt, I changed to the Hodge icon originally. Like, if there's a spell that's just the same, I'll just change the icon. It's confusing for stream. But
I used to do that too. Back in Warlords of Draenor, I made at the very end of Warlords is when I swapped to HPAL. And because I was a priest main. I was a priest main for most of my WoW time up
Oh,
until
wow.
then. And then at the very end of Warlords, I got recruited by BDG
Oh, shit.
to play HPAL, and I'm pretty sure I made my Holy Shock. I switched my Holy Shock to something. I forget what it was, but I used an icon of one of the priest abilities that was like
Yeah.
very similar. And I started switching my icons and making like custom macros. I don't
Uh-huh.
really recommend doing that anymore.
Yeah.
But it was like a nice little way to get used to it at the start because my brain was so hard coded to just play priest and like use all the priest buttons. So I
Yeah, no,
definitely did
that
that
makes
too.
sense. Especially because sometimes, like, I find when I'm learning new specs, like, I can kind of handle it, and then, but when it's like a pressure moment, and I just stare at these icons, and I just go like, "Fuck, what do these things do?"
Yeah,
sometimes
before
I
you
just like
built the muscle
overheat.
memory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like I can calmly think about it, but like when shit hits the fan, it's like I don't have the like, hey, I can call stops while doing this healing rotation. Like I just fucking can't. Sorry. Like I'm just
Yeah.
gonna stand here for 2 seconds and like, what does Radiance keep on to? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh shit! I was gonna ask you. You've been playing with Terrathal sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I've seen him in your streams. I love his weak aura pack. He's kind of like you and him are kind of like the two people that I've stolen the most stuff from. Because I didn't know that you could use Bigwig's timers as a trigger.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
And I was like, whoa. So like every now and then, like I'll get one of those like realizations from one of your guys' weak auras. But
yeah,
I
you can
always
literally
thought you
use
guys
anything as a trigger.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. Like, I have people will be like, "Oh, what are you up to?" They'll DM me in game. I'm like, just making a week aura. Like I'm sitting in town. Like Marvel hit me up for. She wants something for cultivated poisons at the end of aura. So I made one that it like shows the longest duration remaining. So there's just like a timer in the middle of like when they're gonna explode, and then I made like a 3-2-1. That's actually like a 4-3-2, so the one's like 1 second early. That does a slash say. But I love it when like if I watch someone's VOD and I'm like, oh, your team keeps dying to this, like I'm gonna make you a weak aura and it'll literally never happen again. Like it's very satisfying. But
well, the biggest weak aura I ever created was I had created a defensive assignments weak aura for MDI.
Oh,
which made it so that
top secret.
Oh yeah, big top secret weak aura. But I made it so that there, like in the custom options, you could go through and pick every single number of an ability. So like, let's say for the third static surge in Halls of Infusion, I want these buttons pressed, and then you could just checkbox whichever spec you wanted, whether it was like, I had all the priest defensives, mage defensives, and you assign whichever defensives you want for each mechanic that comes out numbered in each fight. And so anytime a mechanic is about to happen, it would pop up on that class's screen and say, press this defensive now. And so it just like auto assigned everything.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that was huge. Like the most fun I ever had with making a custom weak aura.
That sounds fun as hell.
It was a massive project that took me like a week, but it was so much fun coding. And
very
also just like
too.
learning how to, it's so rewarding and satisfying once you actually get a weak aura like that to function properly, especially with all the custom Lua code and stuff. I don't know. Yeah. My brain loves that stuff.
Yeah, that sounds sick. I did something and not as advanced, but I made part of my pack it's like a dwarf helper / feign death clears poisons and diseases now. And
I have one of those.
Not dispersion. What is it called? What's the monk thing that shoots the magic back?
Diffuse.
Yeah. So I made it so it's like the first time. So if you're doing the last boss of Siege, the first time you get hit with the debuff, it'll tell you to diffuse, and then the second time it'll tell you to dwarf, and so on. But it'll only show up like one of them. And because I play with a lot of my friends, like we don't push super high. Like pretty much everyone has like a 9-to-5 job and a wife or whatever. So like we play like most of them play a few times a week, and then I play like all the time, but just on all these alts. But I'm like constantly being like, yo, dwarf that, dispel that, or whatever. There's like a little bit less. There's like 2 seconds of lag before they notice. And now I'm just like, just take this weak aura. You'll dwarf it before I tell you to, like basically.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't have to it's kind of the same thing as you don't have to tell them like this is mass barrier. You know it's on their screen already.
Yeah.
And like once you do that, it like levels up the group so much.
Yeah.
It just takes a little bit, or
one
a
of the
lot,
things
actually, off your plate.
Yeah, one of the things when I started Prop Pally last week, one of the things I wanted to create, which I finished the other day, was a priority system that basically, when a boss is about to cast an ability, it checks which defensives I have available and then tells me to press one of them based on a priority that I give it. So like for example, Ardent first, and then, so you could apply the same exact concept to that, where it's like, if diffuse is available, then it tells you to diffuse. If diffuse is not available and Stoneform is, then it tells you to Stoneform. And if neither are available, then it tells you to press one of your defenses that is available.
Right. I didn't get to the defensives yet, but it will work like that, which is
exactly.
Cool.
And so that kind of
like. I was gonna say I want to make one, but there's so many different defensives. Like I made one for AMS, AMZ, or AMS Death's Advance rather.
Yeah.
Which took me a bit of a long time, but it works for every like targeted pre-AMS kind of thing. And I really wanted to make them for all the other classes, but I was like, damn, this is gonna take a sec.
Yeah. There's no way with the defensive creep and the fact that every spec has like 5 fucking buttons that they can press. It's just, there's no way I will ever build a weak aura like that for every spec. I mean, maybe if I had, a month of downtime and just wanted
pause
a project,
time,
yeah, I would consider it. But
yeah,
it's that there's just too much defensive power and too many defensives in the game to go through every single mechanic, and
and the nightmare, especially with next patch when everything changes and you're like, fuck.
That's the biggest thing, especially with dungeons rotating every season. It's just not worth the time investment.
Oh, speaking,
you would need a war that you could literally custom like assign a spell ID and then custom assign defensive priority for that for every spec without having to alter the code. It would have to be which could be doable potentially, but that, like I said, it would be a big project for sure.
Yeah. I just realized we're close to an hour, so I want to get some questions in. I don't know how much time we got, but I don't want to keep it too long. So I'm gonna open some Discord questions. And by the way, if you're like, hey, I gotta go, you could just be like, bye. Don't let me keep you past whatever you're comfortable. Because I could yap about shit forever, especially weak chords.
Same.
Like, I was telling Leanne, I was like, I don't think this will be the first person I've talked to that like enjoys UI stuff more than me. Like ever. So this is exciting. I never get to talk about stuff. Let me see. I can share this. Can you see this screen?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Can you give me like 1 minute though?
Yeah. Do your thing. Yeah. Take a. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be right back.
I'll AFK a sec. Grab some water. So I forgot. I was looking over my questions, but the reason why I brought up Terrathal was I always thought you guys should do like a collab on your weak auras. Like, if you combined like some of your stuff with his dungeon pack, it would save a lot of pugs probably if they downloaded it. But because I use a bunch of your guys' stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. And then actually let's go. Yeah, let's do these questions real quick, or just a couple. Ask him why he hates pineapple on pizza so much. What's that about?
Because it's an abomination.
I was gonna use that word. Okay. So I used to think it was an abomination. I grew up in a pizzeria, so I like made pizza as a kid my whole life.
Okay, so you know.
Yeah, so I had never ate pineapple on pizza.
Oh no, I don't like where the story is going.
Takes a turn.
I don't like where this is going at all.
Marriage changes people. No,
no.
My husband likes, this is like almost a deal breaker. He likes Domino's pizza, which is not pizza. In my opinion.
My girlfriend likes like, Domino's pizza too. Leanne loves that shit.
I know how it goes. I'm like, okay, you can eat this and you can like it, but don't fucking call this pizza. Like, this is something else. And abomination is a word that I throw around a lot involving Domino. So anyway, I've tried pineapple on that with like a bunch of other shit, and it was pretty good, but it's not my favorite. So you're very anti-pineapple?
Very, very much so.
I can get on board because Domino's doesn't count. So, I don't have pineapple on real pizza.
I agree. Domino's does not count as pizza.
There we go. All right, we have the rotated. I wish this attached their fucking names. All right, I'm so bad at this. I don't know who any of these questions are for. I forwarded them to like a secret channel.
Yeah.
So I could see them, but I don't know. I'll add it in post, but thank you for so yeah, rotating seasonal dungeons for some time now. I love the variety we get season to season, but I've heard differing opinions on the topic. Dungeons aren't around long enough to get proper tuning. New dungeons every season mean pugs are worse on average. Some don't want to see the old dungeons. What are your thoughts on the map pool season to season? I guess more so not the specific dungeons, but like the cadence of the changing, I guess. How do you feel about that?
So it's complex because they're absolutely right. But it's a trade-off, right? Because if you remember, nobody liked doing Shadowlands dungeons for 3 years. And nobody liked
Halls of Atonement.
I mean, sure, Halls of Atonement was
I'm sure
fun,
you were sick of it by the end.
For, you know, 3 years? No.
Yeah, it's rough.
I think it's true that it definitely leads to dungeons not getting proper tuning, and that pugs are worse. But it's not just pugs; it's everyone. Everyone is worse,
right,
at the dungeons. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think that a lot of the fun of dungeons is learning the dungeons and learning how to optimize them. And the problem when it's just the same dungeon every season for an entire expansion is that you get that opportunity in the first season, and then by the second season pretty much everything is solved except for like very minor route changes, or if they make tuning passes, then very, you know, little things here and there. But like there's no more of the solving the new dungeons type of shit, which is I think the whole fun of WoW is like learning how to beat these dungeons and learning the mechanics and exploring, you know.
Getting a new dungeon and like conquering it with like practice and UI stuff is like, I don't know what this game is all about for me, really.
Yeah. And
like
so
seeing a new dungeon for the first time, and then like just the whole time I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this to this thing. It's like very exciting.
Yeah. So I think that they're absolutely right that it definitely leads to poor tuning, and I think that that's something Blizzard needs to be more active about. Like we should not be going through this entire season with Stonevault and Grimbatol the way that they are relative to other dungeons, especially Grimbatol. Like there should be more active tuning, more aggressive tuning very early on, so that there aren't crazy outlier mechanics that are just infinitely harder than other things.
What actually, I haven't been pushing this season. What are like the things where it's like the earliest key level where you're like, oh Jesus, this is overtuned in Grimbatol? So like the tank slashes, or just the bosses?
Well, the tank, some of the tank shit is just insane in Grimbatol, but also mostly it's the lava benders mixed with sorcerers.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And just sorcerers or warlocks in general. The curses are just way too punishing. I have no idea. I mean, they nerfed it initially, but how it initially was
it was 2 each. It was like 2 curses
each, actually.
Oh, like 3?
I'm pretty sure they put out 3 curses.
So someone would get double stacks.
Dude,
I didn't notice that.
Nuts. It was nuts.
On beta. It was fucking insane. Those pools would one tap you too from the dragon.
Yeah.
If you dipped your toe, you were just one shot.
Yeah. So I mean, things like that. Like, I'm glad that they nerfed them, but also they didn't nerf them enough. The decurse is still required. It's still extremely punishing. Then you have crazy, like you still have some insane one-shot mechanics, like Blightbone, the first boss of Necrotic Wake, just one-shotting people at like plus 13 key levels is
not
nuts.
Even. Like if you don't have gear, I've literally seen people 100 to 0 in like an 11.
Yeah. If you
like,
don't have gear,
because they're like 6'10" or whatever, and they're like, what happened?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like there are just some outlier mechanics that are just like, what are we doing here? And so I think those need to get addressed more aggressively for sure. I do personally prefer new dungeons every season, like a new dungeon pool every season.
Yeah.
I think sometimes revisiting old dungeons is great, and then other times it's poor. And it just depends on whether or not they spend the time that they need to making them more Mythic Plus friendly and better. So like a bad example would be Shadowmoon Burial Grounds, where they just like didn't do anything with the mechanics, and you ended up having a boss that was like 5 minutes long with 0 mechanics.
Yeah, there is that worm, right?
Yeah, the worm. And
where you'd fall asleep.
Yep. and then you had like one really overtuned part of the dungeon, and then a bunch of just like cheese spots, and the whole dungeon itself was like way too easy, and it was way too linear. There was no like weird routing or anything. It was just that's an example of a dungeon that they brought back really poorly. And then one that they did decently well was like Temple of Jade Serpent was pretty good out if you didn't include the very last pack before the last boss. That was stupid. Definitely needed to do something about that, but they never did. But I did like Temple and what they did with it outside of that. I just think that sometimes they hit it really well and sometimes they don't. And like, for example, this season, I don't know what they were thinking bringing back Siege of Borealis. That was insane. Grim Batol was a terribly brought back dungeon. Mists and Necrotic Wake, I think, are okay. Necrotic Wake, I'm not a big fan of personally. I think that, especially at higher key levels, the last boss is insane. And
that shield is very weird. And I've been struggling healing that because it's kind of a UI thing for me. Like, I'm having trouble just noticing that it comes out. Like, I just need to change the sound. But it's weird because there's not a lot of mechanics that are like that, where it's like there's the shield. There's no like cast bar. I don't know. Yeah. It just, the thing, I don't know, it's different.
Yeah. Sorry, and the fact that it like ramps and then is constantly sending DPS down. Like, one of the reasons that I don't think HPAL can, like, that HPAL caps out at Necrotic Wake specifically is because without a priest, that last boss is legit like impossible at a plus 18 key level. Sure, like, even at a 17, if you don't have a heavy melee comp, or you don't have or if like you play with an AUG, or you don't have some type of cheese, then you just cannot do that boss, because what a priest does at the higher key levels is it just MCs the Fleshcrafter, brings it up, and then you just use a cleaver on the shield every time. So the boss dies in like 2 minutes, and it's a complete joke. And then you go from that to the boss literally being impossible without a priest at the same key level. And it's just like, I don't know, that like the fact that that's the type of shit that makes me not like it when they bring back dungeons, is when they bring it back but don't spend the proper time making it,
like, figuring out why is it that they're MCing this mob. Like, it's definitely annoying to do. Like, they don't want to be doing this, but if it's correct, then they'll do it. But it is a lot of like micromanaging. It's almost weird because in some cases M plus is like, I don't want to say carried by stuff like that, but it's like, do you think that boss would be nerfed if every high key person couldn't use that thing? They would be like, oh well,
it would be nerfed.
These are 2 key levels lower than everything else, or like it might stick out more. But then it's like, oh, well, every high-end player just dom mines the thing anyway, so who cares?
Yeah, or if the Great Push happened, then this season, instead of MDI, 100% that boss would have been nerfed, and the MC tech would have probably been broken. But, like, because they're just MCing, nobody is raising any hell about it at all. Nobody, like, cares to even say anything, because everyone is just using a priest and MCing the mob, and then it's not even a factor. So it's kind of frustrating. But yeah, I don't know. There are some dungeons that they bring back really well, and then there are other dungeons that they bring back really poorly. And when they do it well, I love it. When they do it poorly, it's miserable. But I think overall, I definitely prefer it to just having the same dungeons over and over and over again every single season for an entire expansion. That just gets old so fast.
This kind of ties into this question here. This is the first time since, I think, Legion that we're getting a brand new dungeon immediately added mid-season to the M+. I didn't play Legion, so I don't remember what that was, but do you think that's cool, or do you have any like concerns about it? Do you wish that they would do it as like an M0 for a season and then like tune it, or?
No, I never liked when they did M0 first and then opened it up the next season. I felt like we had a new dungeon there, but then we played it hype and then never played it again. And it was just like, I don't know. They did it with Dawn of the Infinite, with all the mega dungeons, Karazhan, all that stuff. And I never liked when they did that. So I'm actually glad that we're just going to jump straight in M+, because I think it'll result in better tuning.
True.
Because when they try to tune it around M0, it never worked, because the reality is like for example, stuff like Necrotic Wake Last Boss, it doesn't matter on an M0. You don't even
you don't notice that there's a shield.
You don't notice any of these like factors don't even come into play until the key starts scaling. You know, there are a lot of phenomenons like that. Like, for example, in Waycrest Manor, there was this ability that no one even really knew existed. And it was called, hold on, let me pull it up on MDT. Well, I don't know how new MDT works. How do I get to other seasons?
Oh, good question.
Maybe a set.
I don't know if you can. I don't have my game open.
You used to be.
Do you remember what the spell does? Maybe I randomly know the name.
It was I don't. It just randomly hits somebody for a certain amount of their health.
Oh, okay. No, I don't know. I'm sure I've died to it though.
Hold on, Keystone Guru's got me covered.
Cool.
It was, I think it was this mob, the Infected Peasant. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so the Infected Peasants had this ability called Withering Glob. Now, Withering Glob was an ability that most people didn't even know existed at lower key levels. It's an instant cast ability. It never actually, you'll see it cast.
Yeah.
All that happens is someone just gets damaged. And at lower key levels, it did basically no damage at all. So no one even ever noticed. But as key levels started getting higher, people started noticing their health just randomly getting dipped low. And sometimes in conjunction with another ability, that would happen at the same time. Like, you know, the little dudes spitting at the players.
Right.
As soon as that happened and people started getting comboed by that plus Withering Glob, everyone was like, oh shit, what is this fucking ability and how do we counter it? And so you got to these higher key levels and you had all these players like, what the fuck is this ability? I've never even heard of this. I don't know what it does. And so there are a lot of interactions like that at these key levels where you don't even know something is a problem until you hit a certain scaling level. Now, some people will say, you know, that's a 1% problem. And to a certain extent, that's kind of true. It is more of like a 1% problem. A lot of these things are. But I also think that tuning dungeons well is not something that negatively impacts lower key levels. It's only something that's beneficial, especially for WoW's population in general, because so many like WoW streamers and so much of WoW's marketing and streaming online comes from you know, high-end Mythic Plus players, because that's like a huge portion of WoW streaming and what interests a lot of people to watch, because it's like one of the few esports, that and PvP. And then Race to World first. But it's like, I think it's only beneficial to WoW to tune these things and make things well tuned in dungeons. So I don't really understand the argument.
There's no
of
like downside. Yeah,
exactly. I hear a lot of arguments like, who cares? They shouldn't.
Yeah.
They shouldn't care because it's a 1% problem. It's like, okay, that's fair, but it's also like not something that negatively impacts. And I don't think that you would have to dedicate any even remotely significant amount of resources to work on dungeon tuning.
Like we need like a dungeon, like not representative, but like someone that works at Blizzard that we could DM and be like, dude, like just this one ability, like please, what is this? Like, can you email someone? Like, because a lot of the things is like, if they knew, I don't know. I can't decide. It's like, surely if they knew that existed, they would just take it out, right?
Well,
they just didn't.
There are some things that they have opinions about, and that's fine. Like, you know, I have had direct lines to WoW devs before, and sometimes there is a reason that things are tuned highly. You know, sometimes they think that things should be really difficult, or they think that a certain mechanic should be really punishing, or whatever it might be, and that is just a fundamental disagreement, you know, between between the WoW devs and myself or whoever else has that opinion, and that's okay. But then there are also a lot of times when they just legitimately do not realize that, you know, a certain mechanic is broken at a certain key level, or, you know, something X, Y, or Z might be problematic, and you see that come into play more when things like MDI or the Great Push happen, because dungeon tuning starts happening more aggressively when that happens,
Yeah.
because people are being a lot more vocal about it and like, hey, if you want this tournament to be good, we can't be having this mechanic just gatekeep us at this key level.
Yeah.
So sometimes they don't realize, and sometimes it's intentional, and it can be difficult to know when either is the case, which is why giving feedback is always great, but you want to make sure that you're giving feedback not from a place of assuming that they don't know what they're doing, but instead just being constructive and hoping that they listen.
Yeah.
Because
When
a
I'm
lot
on
of times I see people
PTR,
give feedback and it's like,
no,
the
don't
way
be
that they do it,
nasty.
the way
God,
that they
no.
do it is like assuming that they have no idea, that the devs have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
And it's like, that's just not true.
How to
like,
get your feedback thrown in the trash immediately.
Exactly.
Is to write it now.
Yeah.
Like, I'll even go out of my way and be like, thanks for doing what you do, smiley face, or like something. And I always frame it as players that aren't like lifelong M+er mains are not going to understand that this thing works like this. Like, I always try to put it like that, because I don't think that, like you said, like a lot of for the high end stuff is just like, all right, get good. Like, it's a hard system. I don't know what you want. You know, it's scaling. But I try to, if there's things I identify, like, hey, this frontal doesn't have an animation, and they've been good at adding those to a lot of things. But like things like that, I try to look more for, where it's like, you're going to get farmed in a +8 and you're not going to understand why. Is I think a lot more damaging to M+ than like, hey, this one shot's at a 17 instead of a 19 or whatever.
Exactly. And that's the type of feedback that they're much more open. Like,
yeah,
the stuff where it's like, it only affects the 1%. It's true. That stuff very rarely gets cared about. And I think that makes sense, because they want to allocate their time towards the things that are going to impact the most amount of people.
Yeah, of course.
But I think also to a certain extent, like I was saying, if you can allocate a little bit of resources to making sure that at least some of these outlier mechanics don't stay outlier mechanics the entire season, which is what they've done in the past. In previous expansions, they have addressed those things because they've had long enough to do it, which ties back to the new dungeon season thing. It's like, it's not like they don't care about the 1%. It's just that they might not necessarily have time to allocate resources to that because of how fast-paced their scheduling is right now with all the new content coming out every single season.
That totally makes sense,
Yeah, so a lot of things end up having to take a back seat, and one of those things is the polish at the higher end of key levels, which unfortunately is what a lot of people see, because so many streamers are high-end players, and so many people, you know, when they go to watch World of Warcraft, it's esports related.
And then they just hear them being like, these dog shit dungeons.
Exactly.
Even though like they'll never be within 5 key levels of that, like the viewer maybe, like they might not go in and they don't care about that shield on Necrotic Wake, but then they leave the stream and they're like, you're right, these dog shit dungeons. You know? Yeah. So it kind of like, even though it's affecting a small percentage of people, maybe from their point of view, they're like less than even title pushers encounter this problem. Whereas we have a bug right now where like you can't mail stuff to your alt. Like, which one of these is more important on the desk? Like, obviously the one, you know, that everyone uses, the mailing system. And then like, you know, whatever.
But to be fair, like that's what they have different teams for. And they definitely don't. For sure. There's not the same person fixing those types of bugs that is looking at
I would
dungeon
assume.
tuning.
Yeah, just as an example, like of priorities, I guess. But yeah,
I think
for sure.
Sometimes I do wish that they had just one dedicated person to always be looking at dungeon tuning. But I think that their concept right now is that because the season is so short, and because we're getting new dungeons every single season, they don't want to be tuning dungeons this late into the season, because people have already, you know,
it's like, how much life does the dungeon have left that we're even tuning it for? Like, this is barely worth
that. But also, like, let's say they just heavily slash Grimbatol and Stonefall. All of a sudden, everybody's score that they worked really hard for is now pointless, because, you know, because now you can do Grimbatol and Stonefall easily at that same key level that they've already done.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
To a certain extent, it diminishes people's accomplishments that they've worked for during the season. Once it's gone on too long, which is why I hope that they're a little more aggressive. We saw some aggressive dungeon tuning for the first 2 weeks or so, but then we haven't gotten any since then, outside of a few small things. So I would prefer a system where they at least, you know, the first 2 months or so could be spent, with just weekly tuning passes, making sure that outlier mechanics are addressed and such. And then as you get further along into the season, it becomes less and less, to the point where, dungeon tuning is locked at a certain point.
Yeah.
Which
I
I
feel
think
nice when they change stuff. You do kind of feel seen when there's like a random proc. You're like, wait, they just nerfed this and it wasn't expected. Like, it's not early in the season. It doesn't happen a lot. I feel like I remember it happening a few times though. Like something Adrevault maybe, like just random things where you're like, oh, they are kind of paying attention.
Yeah.
To us. Okay. How are we doing on time, by the way? If you gotta go, you gotta go. No worries. Okay.
No, I'm fine.
Sweet. Let's do. I rate so I won't show these on the thing, but I put a green and a yellow and a red based on like which ones I want to play, and this one got a red because it's funny. But all right, we'll do this. Let me know if you can hear it.
I don't think so, but maybe you can relay.
Actually, that's fine. I already asked this question. I could crop this part out too. Let's see. Okay, so this one's, what do you love about Holy Paladin that keeps you playing it all the time, when obviously you have the skill to, you could just reroll the Disc Priest if you wanted to and you'd be highly competitive. Is there like, what sticks out to you as like, damn, I just fucking love this spec?
I mean, I spent a lot of my WoW time over the last 6 years re-rolling to the meta spec, whether it was playing Holy Priest in seasons 3 and 4 of Shadowlands, or whether it was playing, Mistweaver in Dragonflight, or Evoker in season 1 of Dragonflight, or whatever it might be. Like, I spent a lot of time doing that. And I think right now I'm just kind of at a point where I'd rather play what I enjoy and be as competitive as I can playing what I enjoy than focus on just re-rolling to whatever's the most meta and trying to play that at the highest level. I'd rather I have more fun seeing how far and how strong I can make HPAL and how much I can squeeze out of this spec that I love. Because I'm really passionate about HPAL. Also, I think it's probably a little bit of my autism. I think it might be a bit of both, where I just like to,
you like what you like.
See every single possible thing that I can min max out of HPAL, and I don't know. I get into one thing and then I just stick with that one thing.
I feel that.
So
I like players like that though. Like, Marvel, obviously she plays Feral, like she's really, really good at it, and that's what she plays. And like Leanne plays, or she would play Holy Priest, and that's what she plays, and she's good at it. And like, I like those. I don't know. There's something cool about that, of just being like, because I always trust those people to know way more about their spec than I do. Because I tend to make, like, I made a prot warrior. I have a prot paladin that's like super low. I have a Disc Priest. Like, I always play AUG. I kind of like make meta alts, not to push on them, but to like understand what's going on and like how to play them. And like, oh, you can just have 100% shield block uptime on your warrior if you wanted. So it's like, I can help my friend. Hey man, like, you can tank this pull. It's not too bad, but like, just keep up the shield block or whatever. Versus like, I would not really have to, like, I would never tell Marvel like, hey, this talent's better than you know what I mean? Like, that's just off limits. She has her shit covered. I'm not fucking with that. Like, it's fine. So and then it's also cool because like there's something cool about re-rolling to the meta and like pushing as high as you can and going for the highest, but like there's something cool about just, this is my spec and I'm gonna push it to the limits, and if that's a key level below whatever, then fuck it. Like, this is what I'm rocking. Like, I don't know. I respect that a lot. I think that's really cool.
I just love like mastering things,
Yeah.
Like, I love being the best that I possibly can at something. Like, I played violin for 25 years, almost 30 years now, and it's just like, I love all the little stuff that you can like min max, and there's just so much intricacy that you can put into a spec that like you don't even realize until you have.
You're talking about min maxing the violin for a second.
Well, I mean, I use the term min max for other stuff now.
It makes sense.
But
I use AFK in real life. Like, if I'm at work, like not doing anything, I'm like, oh, I'm like AFK.
Yeah. No, it's just like, I love getting as like squeezing every possible drop of knowledge that I can out of something, and like figuring out every tiny, small little detail that I could adjust to just get like a fraction more optimal. That kind of stuff I find really, really fun. And I think I'm at the point in my WoW career where I'm just like, I'm sick of re-rolling to the meta, and I just want to have fun doing what I'm good at and being the best that I possibly can at this, you know?
Yeah, and there's also something of like people, especially like you being such a well-known holy paladin, like people aren't gonna really like. I can't imagine someone dropping you and be like, "Oh, we just can't play with Ellesmere. Like HPAL just sucks." It's like no, like that's that's like the one HPAL that you invite, like no matter what.
Well, unless I don't know,
it's
season
like
3
Marvel,
or 4 of Dragonflight.
Sure, but like I would never not invite Marvel because of Farrell's tuning or something.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Like I guess once you're kind of like a trusted player of that spec, like you kind of, it's like it would be different if you were someone that no one knew and you were like applying to a +12 or whatever. Like the pressure might feel differently, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure that's definitely the case. Like I know getting into groups as HPAL right now is really hard, despite the fact that HPAL is not even that bad. It's just
I was playing with one in the beginning of the season quite a bit. She was great.
Yeah, it's just a community perception issue, and those are rampant these days. But that's a very long topic.
Yeah, I kind of have a question. We don't have to go too deep, but I wanted to ask, in a like if there was a universe where like there was no Raider.io leaderboard and no one streams or like communicates group comps or whatever, do you think that everyone like in a vacuum by themselves would settle on the same meta? Or do you think that there's like a few outliers early on where you go like, oh, Enhance is just busted, so that's our lust, so now we make the comp around it? And then if something else was competitive, you might be like, well, it doesn't fit because now we have all this synergy where like if you think of like God comp or whatever, like all of those things complemented each other in a way that like swapping one of them out, even if that thing by itself was really good, it like almost doesn't make sense. So I guess I think
that the meta would not exist at most key levels, but at the highest end, all the like min-maxers would for sure find
they'd eventually settle on this.
They'd eventually settle on a very similar comp, I'd imagine.
Okay.
Maybe not exactly the same, but like there's no world where all of the top players would not be playing Prop Pally this season, even in, there might be some variance with other things, but like Prop Pally and Disc Priest would probably be a lock. Enhanced Shaman would probably be a lock, and Evoker would probably be a lock. You might have some variance with Frost DK. That would be like the one spec that I could see a lot of variance on. But again, that would just be at the highest level. For most key levels and most players, I think that the meta would just simply cease to exist. I don't think that there would be a meta. I think that most of the time, I think that people would realize that min-maxing really doesn't matter until you hit an extreme key level, and people would just play what they want to play. And that's how the game should be played. But unfortunately, with tier lists and, websites and all this shit that like
it's so self-inflicted.
Oh, it's absolutely the most self-inflicted.
Like, I hate the meta, and then they search the tier. Like, dude, I have one friend, shout out Frank, who I make fun of all the time, because every season it's like he'll do like the equivalent of +10 to +12 range. But he's always linking the tier lists. He's like, I just can't play AF. And he's fine. I would make fun of him all the time. He's cool with me roasting him, I'm sure. But like, I always like tease him about it because he'll like re-roll. He can't play a certain Warlock spec. And then I'll be like, I just played with an AF-lock and he was like top damage in the 10. Like it, I don't know. It's so inconsequential. I guess it matters for invites. Like,
yeah,
maybe that's what people are stressing for. Is like they just want to get in.
That's the biggest issue, is that like I know so many HPALs that are great players, but they literally can't get invited to keys because of community perception issues. And a lot of times those community perception issues are preformed and don't change with tuning. So for example, Shadowlands is like the best thing that I bring up when I talk about this community perception issue, because what happened in Shadowlands beta was HPAL was very undertuned, and people were freaking out about it. And they were like, HPAL is so undertuned and so terrible. And I'm like, guys, I promise HPAL will get tuning. They're not going to release a spec that's just doing half the healing of others. Like every single season, they will get tuning. It'll be fine. but that tuning didn't come until a little bit before release. And by then, all of the tier lists had come out. And all of the tier lists were placing Paladin in like the F tier or the D tier. And so
didn't you just roll up with Ashen Hollow right after that?
Yeah, so all these holy pallies re-rolled and played other specs. And so all these guilds had no H-Pals prepared. And all of a sudden, Race the World First happens, and all these H-Pals are in there playing Ashen Hollow and dominating. And even the Kyrian ones are dominating. Like, literally, H-Pal was just so strong. And because of that late tuning, that was inevitable. Like, they're not going to release specs that are doing half the healing of other specs. We knew that there was tuning coming. Obviously, there will be highs and lows, but it's not going to be egregious. And if it is, it will get addressed. And so what ended up happening was, because of these issues, everybody looked at those tier lists before release and then didn't look at any updates to those tier lists, because that's what happens. People see the tier list once, they form their perception of the meta and of specs, and then they hold on to that
they
for
tell all
a
their
very
friends.
long time.
Yeah,
exactly. And then that's how community perception issues are born, because then tuning happens, and unless that spec that was undertuned becomes like the most broken thing on the planet, which did happen in Shadowlands. So fortunately, H-Pals were able to salvage that community perception issue, but only because we were just so beyond busted.
Strong. Yeah, exactly.
That's the only
if they were
way
just competitive, you probably would have never overcame that.
Exactly. And so, but going into Shadowlands, when H-Pal became like super meta within a week or so of Race the World First happening, all these guilds were left without a paladin. I had so many paladins coming into my channel like, bro, I re-rolled other healers. I'm like super screwed. What do I do? I haven't even looked at H-Pal. I don't have an H-Pal prepared. All these guilds were left without holy pallies. It was a very weird time and a very eye-opening time for me, where it was like, wow, this community perception issue is very real and has very real impacts. And it's only really gotten worse with more content creators putting out tier lists every season, more websites, like auto-generating AI tier lists, and the meta has just
that's right.
been shoved down everyone's throats at this point. So and like you said, it's all self-inflicted. It's not Blizzard's fault, and the fact that people see, you know, some of these specs dominating and are like, I literally can't do a +10 without this spec, is a big problem, because you can do a +15 key with literally any spec in the game. Like 5 completely off meta specs in good players' hands can absolutely do a +15. And yet you have people struggling in +10s and blaming it on the meta. And so I don't know.
It's like the same thing as the focus on the stats and not the UI. You know, it's like your attention to the details is like, it's like you're looking at the wrong detail. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll even see in LFG, it'll be like +12 need Frost Decay. And like, those are the groups that I avoid. Yeah. Because they're like, I just know that they're, I mean, maybe not all the time, but like, those are the groups that are yelling at each other, that are like, why didn't you do this? They're not kicking stuff. And then they're healer ? Like, those, I don't know. I try to avoid those types of groups if at all.
And then
possible.
It's funny because you see the things that are like, you know, need Prot Warrior at the start of the season, and then 2 weeks later the meta shifts and they're like, need Prot Pally, and it's like, what happened to Prot Warrior? It was totally fine doing these keys a week ago, and it didn't get nerfed. It's just that Prot Pally got buffed, and
See, I actually preferred the Prot Warrior meta for pugging, because Prot Warrior, like, I know because I played it a bit, is very easy to like play a defensive build and just like live and chill. And like, I really only had to learn the mechanics. Like when I tried a couple 12s on the Warrior, I started getting owned. But like, for the most part, it's like, keep up your basic stuff. Whereas like, I think Prot Paladin, a lot of people, they're, oh, it's OP, I'll just go play the OP spec. But like, if say you're just a tank and you don't understand like click bindings, like mouse overs and stuff, like you're not sacking anybody, you're not using your hand, like it's very involved. It's more involved than Prot Warrior by like, for me, like double.
Well, it's like a support
more
tank.
Going on.
It's not just a tank, it's a support
and that's what
tank.
makes it strong. And then a lot of people reroll the meta things and they don't understand what makes it meta. Like like a Shadow Priest priority damage. Like that's what made it so fucking good, was that you can just pick a target and like annihilate that thing to the point where you're ripping threat and have to fade like on the prio mob, you know? And then like, you know, someone would re-roll and they're dumping all of their spenders on some shitter mob that does nothing. And you're like, oh, okay. So, you know, you're on the right spec, but a lot of people don't apply it in the same way. Whereas you might be better off with like a BM hunter that's just going to press 2 buttons and like vibe out in the back.
Exactly.
I don't know. It's interesting the way that the meta works. And there's almost like a curve where people that are doing really low keys don't know what the meta is. And then people that are like doing medium keys are like obsessed. And then right when you get over that, people are like, I don't give a shit. You just have to be a good player. Yeah. And then right above that is like, okay, now it actually matters. So we're going to play the meta. Like, but everyone acts like they're in a different category. I found. Yes, absolutely. Like, everyone thinks that they're higher in that curve than they really need to be.
Yeah.
And you really just should focus more, in my opinion, on like, is this person a good player? Like, I love healer alts that play AUG. Like, I will invite the fuck out of them. I don't care the item level. Like, if you're like, I don't know, some 3K resto shaman and you have an AUG that's like 2K, I'll bring you to anything I'm doing. Yeah. I don't care. I know you're
any support, like any support style player or a spec, whether it's like, you know, Ret or Prot Pally or Augvoker, anything like that is so strong in the hands of a healer. As long as they know, like, as long as they can translate their knowledge well, it is crazy how much or how good those players are on those specs.
Yeah. Or like a tank main that's playing something that can like soothe that guy in Grimbatol or something. Like people that you can kind of tell like, oh, he's been through the shit that I'm about to go through. So like he or she is going to, you know, cover me. Like Marvel's really good at soothing those Grimbatol guys.
Yeah.
And just like, I don't know, like that's so much more important than 10% more overall damage, is like you're soothing the guy that kills the tank.
Agreed.
Shit like that. Okay. So we actually covered a lot of the questions just by talking. So I don't need to go through all of them. But I am curious. I wanted to show you. I want to get your opinion on just my party frames, because I don't think I've talked to you about it. I know you use Cell, and I was going to switch to Cell. This is actually a highly troll moment. Actually, watch this. Do you know Jessica Dabber, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so she's playing Priest, so I decided to play Spatial to help her. I never play Spatial because no one ever asked for it, but she's on disc, so I'm like, I'll try. This is my first time pressing Spatial in my life in a key, I think. And so I have Spatial running, and I'm about to fire Breath. And you can see I just pulled this back.
Oh, yeah.
Because it really increases your range.
I love that shit. Trust me, you are like, not the first AUG to do that. And you won't be the last.
Dying. I don't know, you can't hear the sound, but I was like, I can explain. Like, I've never pressed this button. We almost
had an AUG, so there's in City of Threads on the you know the first boss in City.
Yeah.
And the way that you like kite it along the wall and then you loop back and kite it the other way.
Oh my god, the upstairs mob?
The upstairs mobs. No. We had an AUG pull those with Spatial Fire Breath, and it was quite funny.
Yeah, now after this run I made a WeakOra that it shows Spatial icon and just says LMAO in all caps, so that I won't forget.
That's funny.
But, yeah. So what I wanted to ask, so my party frames, this is LVY, and then I have 6 dynamic groups. So it's top left, top right, bottom left. This little icon is my cheat. So like cheat deaths go there. I couldn't really figure out what to do with them, but I kind of like it there. And then on the top is like, since tank is always highest on my frames, it'll be like wings or ardent, like things that only a tank could have. See ardent's up there.
Yeah.
Just so it's like a little bit bigger. But I almost switched to Cell, and then I was like, I think I'm gonna stick with this for a while because I don't know. I just like the way that it works. But
yeah, I mean, to each track their own.
When you use Voodoo, did you track it with Voodoo, or did you have like a WeakOra thing anchored to it?
For what specifically?
For like defensives.
And I used Bouquet, which was that's what Voodoo uses for like on frame stuff. Gotcha. So for Cell, it's just built in. They're called indicators. Cool. And so that's what I use with Cell.
Gotcha. Have you ever dabbled in renaming spells in Plater?
I have not. Plater is like, I have my Plater profile that I really like, and then that's it.
Gotcha.
I do not fuck with custom plater stuff.
Word, I got you.
It's
Basically,
too complex for me.
Yeah. It's like, it's fun. This part of my PTR process is like, I do this before the season.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I just rename, like, if there's Spirit Bolt, it's just Bolt. Frostbolt is Bolt. Like, I just simplify stuff. And then you can change the colors of the cast too. Like, for frontals, I make them red.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, just shit like that. So
yeah,
I like Plater. There's a whole lot
Plater's
of shit,
got their new
kind of involved.
Plater's got their new stuff too that like shows the icon and text that says like frontal whenever frontals are happening. That shit's pretty cool.
Oh, I had to turn all that stuff off because it kind of conflicted with what I was already doing.
That's fair.
But it is sweet. Plater is one of those add-ons where it's like, I don't know, kind of managed. Like, the default Blizzard frames are so dog shit.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another question. How do you feel about the default UI? Like, in my opinion, I don't think it would ever be good enough that I would not use add-ons anyway. So I kind of don't care. Whereas some people are like, they need to improve the UI. Like, how do you feel? Do you think, would they ever make it good enough for you, or it's just like add-ons forever, right?
I think it's just add-ons forever because there's just so much accessibility that add-ons provide. Blizzard would have to do an insane amount of work to make even a fraction of what add-ons can provide right now with customizability. Right. And I think a lot of that is really important for accessibility for players. I do think that there's such a thing as add-ons going too far. And I think that we've beyond hit that point. Like, Mythic rating is just cringe now with the sheer level of fucking weak auras and add-ons and all that type of shit. It's gotten way too far. The problem is I don't really know how they fix that because private auras seem like they have not worked out great. Private auras definitely seems like it's been a very poor experiment. I don't know if Blizzard can like work with weak auras or work with add-on creators or something, or limit them, or some type of truce. I don't know what it would be, but I do think that there needs to be something done about where Mythic rating has gone, and just like that type of stuff in general. Also, like the extent to which I can use weak auras to, trivialize a lot of dungeon mechanics. Same thing with that. Like, I think weak auras and stuff like that have gone too far. But I also think that add-ons are incredibly important for accessibility and customization for players. So I think it's kind of, I would not want to be Blizzard in this situation.
For sure. I also would.
It's kind of a lose-lose for them.
Yeah, I'd be like really sad. I feel like customizing UI and like making stuff like that, like that's just part of the game for me. Like, that's a large chunk of the game experience. And I don't think I would. Like, I really enjoy making things look the way that I look, even if I don't need to. Like, this spatial thing is overlapping my health, and that's, like, bothering the shit out of me right now. I think I changed it after this key, because I don't normally have that spell. But, like, I don't know. It brings me, like, peace to, like, organize everything, and if it looks the way I want it to, I'm like, oh, nice.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'd be sad, but it's just another question that I had. So, also on here, a funny moment was in Halls of Atonement back in the day. People were dying to the deadly thrust, and I remember someone in my Discord being like, "What, you don't have the Ellesmere weak aura?" And then we all downloaded it right away.
That's funny.
So I wanted to mention that. Let's see.
Good.
I'm still getting my podcasting experience. I was gonna open the episode by being like, "Yeah, when I started this, I was gonna, get a lot of practice." Learn how to podcast, and then one day I could like interview cool, streamers like Ellesmere, and then I was gonna be like, "Welcome to episode 6 with Ellesmere." That was fast. But yeah, I don't know. That's all the prepared questions that I have. But cool. I do appreciate you, spending your time chatting.
Yeah, of course. Fun. I had a great time. Thank you for having me.
Whenever I typically at Marvel comes on like every other episode, so if you ever want to come and chat with Marvel too, we're down.
Absolutely.
Not right away, but I won't bother you just yet.
You're good.
But yeah, I again really, really appreciate it. Thanks for all the weak auras over the years. And
of course.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks very much for having me, Narner.
Later.